Welcome back to BLACKRIDE Stories, where the shadows speak and every whisper holds a tale. Tonight, we journey to the haunted shores of Lake Erie, a place where the wind never seems to rest, and neither do the souls lost beneath its waves. Our story begins on a moonless night, sometime in the early 1900s, near a small fishing village hugging the shore of Lake Erie. The town, now mostly forgotten, once thrived on the bounty of the lake. But the waters, they say, have a memory, and sometimes they speak. It was in this village that a young boy named Thomas lived with his grandfather, a retired sailor named Captain Elias. Every evening, Elias would sit by the window, pipe in hand, staring out at the dark waters. He rarely spoke, but when he did, his words always returned to one thing: the disappearance of his crew. The lake doesn't just take, Elias once whispered to Thomas. It listens, it remembers, and sometimes it gives back just enough to haunt you. One night, as the fog rolled in thicker than usual, young Thomas couldn't sleep. Drawn by a sound soft, like footsteps on wet wood, he peeked out the window. And there, drifting just above the surface of the lake, were white shapes. Human-like figures, translucent and glowing faintly. Their eyes hollow, their movements slow, almost like they were underwater still. He counted 5, the same number as the crew members his grandfather had lost years ago when their ship, the Wind Caller, vanished without a trace during a storm. The next morning, Thomas told his grandfather what he'd seen. Elias paled, dropping his pipe. "Did they look at you?" he asked. "No," Thomas said. "They just stood there, like they were waiting." That night marked a turning point. Captain Elias became increasingly obsessed. He began talking to the lake, leaving offerings, tobacco, coins, even a small wooden carving of his lost ship. He started keeping a journal, filled with drawings of the apparitions, symbols he claimed came to him in dreams. And Thomas, he started hearing whispers. They came from the walls, from under the floorboards, and always at night. Sometimes he'd wake up to find his bed damp, like it had been pulled briefly into the lake itself. Once he found sand on his windowsill, though his window had never been opened. Then came the night of the full moon. Elias stood at the shore, his arms raised, calling out to his lost crew by name, and the lake answered. One by one, the white figures emerged again, closer this time. They did not speak, but the air grew heavy, pressing down like the deep itself had risen to the surface. Elias stepped into the water. "They're calling me," he said softly, almost smiling. "They remember I was their captain." Thomas screamed for him to stop, but it was too late. As Elias waded deeper, the figures surrounded him. The lake swallowed him without a splash, without a trace. In the morning, his boots were found at the edge of the water. Years passed, but Thomas never forgot. He grew into a man, left the village, tried to bury the past, but the lake did not forget him. On some nights, he would dream of cold water filling his lungs. He'd wake up gasping, the scent of brine and decay thick in his room. When he finally returned to the village decades later, the house was in ruins and the shoreline had receded. But the lake was still there, still watching. He visited on the anniversary of his grandfather's disappearance, and as he stood by the shoreline, he saw them. This time there were 6. Now, local fishermen speak in hushed voices of ghostly figures walking across the surface of Lake Erie at night. Some say they are searching for something. Others believe they are guarding a secret buried beneath the waves, a wreck, or worse, a curse. Several boats have reported electrical failures in the area. Compasses spin wildly, GPS systems glitch, and in one case, Captain claimed to hear a voice whispering coordinates that led him directly into a violent storm. The locals call it the Line of the Lost, a stretch of water no one crosses at night, not anymore. What truly happened that night Elias vanished? Were those his crew, waiting for him all along? Or was it something else, something the lake itself had created to lure him in? Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. The waters of Lake Erie hold their dead close, and sometimes, just sometimes, they let them out to walk again. If you ever find yourself standing by Lake Erie at night, listen carefully. You might hear the sound of boots on wet wood, or the faint whisper of a name carried across the water. And if you see white shapes on the lake, do not follow, because the lake remembers. And now, it remembers you. Part 2, welcome back to BLACKRIGE Stories, where the past is never truly buried, and the silence between walls can sometimes speak back. Tonight, we take you to the city of Cincinnati, Ohio, home to a forgotten house on the edge of Walnut Hills. To the passerby, it's just another decaying property. Chipped paint, boarded windows, and ivy crawling up its brick-like veins. But ask the locals, and they'll tell you, no one stays the night there. The house has stood empty since the autumn of 1972, when a family of 4 of the Moores was found inside, in what police could only describe as a scene of complete confusion. No signs of forced entry, no clear weapon, just a family sitting in their living room, faces frozen in terror, eyes wide open, mouths slightly parted, as if they'd all heard something they couldn't believe or couldn't escape. There were no wounds, no cause of death. But here's where things get truly strange. All the clocks in the house had stopped at 3:17 a.m. The neighbors reported hearing whispers that night, not voices in panic or pain, but low, unintelligible murmurs, like a conversation behind the walls, spoken just below the range of comprehension. After the investigation, the house was sealed, but the story didn't die. Over the years, urban explorers, college daredevils, and even paranormal investigators have tried to stay a full night inside. None succeeded. Most leave after less than an hour, nauseated, disoriented, or utterly terrified. Some report hearing footsteps upstairs even when alone. Others claim that mirrors reflect faces that aren't theirs. And nearly all of them describe one thing in common: the whispering. It's never clear. It doesn't speak a known language, but it starts the moment the sun goes down. It grows louder with each tick of the clock, building like a tide, until it's not just noise. It's inside you, vibrating through your bones, curling around your thoughts like smoke. One man, a former firefighter, tried to prove the legends wrong. He set up cameras and audio recorders throughout the house, locking himself inside just before midnight. When he didn't come out the next morning, police forced their way in. They found him curled up in the upstairs hallway, whispering a single phrase over and over again. They found a mouth. When asked who they were, he wouldn't answer. He never spoke again. He was later committed to a psychiatric facility and remains there to this day. Theories abound. Some say the Moores accidentally uncovered something ancient in the walls or basement, something that speaks not with words, but with thoughts, infecting the mind slowly until it unravels. Others point to records of a church that once stood nearby in the late 1800s, a sect rumored to practice silent rituals, speaking only through symbols and carved tongues. Some even believe the house itself is a vessel, a kind of resonant chamber for something that exists just outside of time. And 3:17 a.m. is when the barrier grows thin enough to let it bleed through. A recent report came from a delivery driver who claimed he saw a woman in the upper window one rainy evening, staring down with her mouth moving silently. He called out. She did not move. A moment later, he blinked and she was gone. But as he turned to leave, he heard a whisper behind his ear, so close it moved the hair on his neck. It said, "It's not our house anymore." Why does the whispering continue? Some believe the Moores never truly left. Others think the house was never meant for humans to begin with, that we built over something ancient, something that doesn't need words to be heard. It's said that if you stand at the bottom of the main staircase at exactly 3:17 a.m., you'll hear your own name, followed by a sound like breathing, but not from any living thing. Several researchers who visited the house in recent years reported missing time. One man claimed to have entered the front door at midnight, explored for 10 minutes, and returned to find it was nearly 5 a.m. His watch, his phone, even the digital timestamps on his camera, all had frozen at 3:17. The house remains unsold. Locals refuse to tear it down, saying it's better to leave it asleep than wake it. A local historian said it best. That place doesn't want to be fixed. It wants to be left alone, like something trying not to be seen or heard. So if you ever find yourself walking near Walnut Hills on a foggy night, and you see a crumbling brick house with a light flickering faintly in the upstairs window. Don't stop. Don't stare. And above all, don't listen, because the whispers are not calling for help. They're calling you home. Part 3, welcome back to BLACKRIGE Stories, where silence isn't safety, and the road ahead might lead you somewhere you can't return from. Tonight's tale takes us to the quiet outskirts of Mansfield, Ohio, where a narrow, winding stretch of asphalt cuts through the woods. The locals call it simply Death Road. By day, it's just another forgotten rural road, Route 109 to be exact. It curves past overgrown fields and trees that seem to lean a little too far over the edge. But after nightfall, something changes. People who've driven that road after midnight speak of a feeling, not fear, not dread exactly, but a cold weight in the chest, as though you're not just being watched but followed. The legend begins with a series of disappearances that started back in the 1950s. At least 12 people are confirmed to have gone missing along that stretch. Some on foot, some in vehicles. None of them were ever found. The most chilling part? Their cars were always recovered, still running, doors open, headlights on, but no sign of the driver. One case in particular haunts Mansfield to this day. In 1986, a man named Derek Klein was driving home from a friend's house just after 2 a.m. He never made it. Police found his truck on the shoulder of Death Road, engine still warm, driver's door hanging open. Inside was Derek's wallet, phone, and even a half-eaten sandwich. But Derek himself? Gone. Later that week, his mother received a voicemail from Derek's phone, except the line had been disconnected. The message was just a low whisper. One word, repeated over and over. Turn. Since then, rumors have only grown. Some say that if you stop your car in the middle of Death Road between 2 o'clock and 2:15 a.m., you'll see a figure standing in the distance. A man, wearing dark clothes, motionless, his head tilted slightly to one side. If you blink, he's gone. But if you keep driving, you might vanish, too. Paranormal researchers have tried to explain it. Some call the road a thin place, a spot where reality wears thin and another dimension bleeds through. Others suggest it's the site of a forgotten tragedy, a mass grave, a ritual gone wrong, or perhaps the remains of an ancient pathway never meant for the living. There's even talk of a woman in white who appears in the rearview mirror, crying silently until the car stops, then vanishing when you turn to look. But perhaps the strangest account came from a young couple in 2004. They were driving back from a late movie, arguing about something trivial, when their car began to act strange. The radio cut out, the dashboard lights flickered, the temperature dropped sharply, and then they saw it. A pale figure stepped into the road ahead, causing them to swerve and stop. It wasn't walking, it was gliding. Its eyes, they said, were too dark, too deep, like holes torn through fabric. The woman tried to get out of the car, but her boyfriend held her back. Just then, all 4 doors unlocked at once, and a voice whispered from the back seat, "Let her walk." They sped off without looking back. Multiple people have reported lost time along Death Road. Drivers claim they were on the road for 5 minutes, only to check their watches and realize an hour had passed. Others find strange handprints on their windshields, or dirt smears in the shape of faces, and some never return at all. There's one local theory that the road is a boundary marker between here and something else, something hungry, that the apparitions seen on the road aren't ghosts at all, but lures, mimicking the form of people to draw you in. You see them, you stop, and then they take your place. It's said that one woman who disappeared was later seen in a gas station 5 towns over. She didn't recognize her own sister. She kept saying she had to go back to the road before they noticed she was missing again. What's most disturbing is that each year, someone new goes missing. Police no longer record it as Death Road in official documents. It's just Route 109. But even they admit, they don't patrol it after dark. If you ever find yourself near Mansfield, and you decide to take a shortcut after midnight, here are 3 rules you must follow. Don't stop. Don't pick up hitchhikers, no matter how real they look. And if you see something in the road ahead, don't trust your eyes, because Death Road doesn't lead anywhere. It takes, whether it's a breach in the fabric of reality, the curse of old blood, or simply the weight of all those lost souls. One thing is clear. Some roads weren't meant to be traveled after dark. And if you hear a voice whisper turn, it's already too late. Part 4, welcome back to BLACKRIGE Stories, where the line between this world and the next grows thinner with each step you take into the shadows. Tonight's tale takes us deep into the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, a vast stretch of forest between Cleveland and Akron, Ohio. It's known for its breathtaking hiking trails, old railways, and vibrant wildlife. But there's one part of the forest the maps don't mark clearly, a section the locals refer to as the Laughing Woods. It begins with sound, not a scream, not a whisper, but laughter, soft, childlike, echoing from somewhere just beyond the trees. Always at dusk, always when you're alone, and always coming from deeper inside. Most who hear it don't even realize what it is at first. It starts as a distant trill, light, playful, almost musical. You might smile. You might feel a strange pull in your chest, like someone tugging at a thread connected to your ribs. But keep walking, and the sound grows clearer, closer, and the laughter, it's no longer innocent. It warps, it stretches, it repeats, as if the same laugh is being played on a loop, only slightly off-key. By then, it's too late to turn around. The first documented report of something strange in the Cuyahoga forest came from a park ranger in 1978. He was doing a routine patrol along a trail called Deer Hollow when he heard what he described as a child giggling in the underbrush. He followed the sound for over a mile, but the forest kept changing. Landmarks disappeared. His compass spun aimlessly, and when he finally radioed for help, his transmission was filled with static and laughter. They found him 2 days later, asleep at the base of a tree he swore hadn't been there before. He didn't remember how he'd gotten there. He also didn't remember his own name, not at first. Since then, hikers have gone missing. Some return, confused and shaken, unable to explain where they've been. Others don't come back at all. Those who return report strange hallucinations, doors standing upright in the middle of the woods, voices calling their names in perfect imitation of loved ones, and most chilling laughter, always just behind them, no matter how fast they ran. A group of college students once filmed themselves exploring the Laughing Woods for a video project. They camped overnight, setting up motion sensors and cameras. The footage shows them sitting around a fire, telling jokes, drinking, until one of them suddenly freezes and looks into the darkness. Then you hear it. Laughter. All of them stop. The fire flickers violently. One camera goes black. The next morning, the park rangers found their campsite intact. No one was there. Only the cameras remained, along with dozens of tiny handprints pressed into the outside of their tents. Some believe the laughter is a trap, a lure meant to guide you into a place that shouldn't exist. A pocket dimension, hidden in the forest. A place between life and death, reality and dream. One theory suggests that during the formation of the park, something ancient was disturbed, a burial site, or maybe a portal once sealed by native tribes long ago. The laughter, they say, is the last echo of whatever was freed. A retired ranger named Martha Green once spoke anonymously about an area she called the Loop. A trail where, if you're not careful, you'll keep walking in circles forever. She claimed to have entered the Loop once in 1992, and though she walked for what felt like hours, the sun never moved. The watch stopped, the birds went silent, and the only sound she could hear in the distance was her own laughter, played back to her in a distorted, slow-motion echo. Technology doesn't help in the Laughing Woods. GPS fails, radios buzz, even analog compasses spin. One group tried using a drone to map the area. It flew straight for 3 minutes, then the feed cut. When they recovered the drone, its onboard footage showed no trees, just fog, and at the very end, a pale face pressed close to the lens, grinning. But not all who enter are taken. One woman, Karen Lates, a botanist, managed to crawl out of the woods after 3 nights missing. She was barefoot, covered in scratches, and laughing uncontrollably. When questioned, she kept repeating, "They're not trees. They're watching." Then, She began humming what sounded like a nursery rhyme and drew the same spiral pattern over and over in the dirt. She now lives in a care facility outside Akron. She refuses to go near a wooded area and hasn't spoken a full sentence in 10 years. What do the spirals mean? Some believe they're gateways, symbols meant to mark the thin places where reality wears thin. Others think they're warnings, but written too late. Whatever the case, one thing remains consistent across every account. The laughter never comes from the same place twice. And once you hear it, it stays with you, even miles away, in your own home, long after you've left the forest behind. It returns, just as the sun goes down. If you ever find yourself walking in the Cuyahoga Valley alone and the woods fall silent, if you hear a laugh, faint and distant, like a child's, do not follow it. Don't call out. Don't listen. Don't try to find the source, because the deeper you go, the louder it gets. And soon, you won't be able to tell if it's coming from the trees or from inside your own mind. Part 5, welcome back to BLACKRIDE Stories, where forgotten places whisper, and those who wait never truly leave. Tonight, we arrive at the edge of Cleveland, where the shadows stretch long over cracked platforms and rusted rails, a place once alive with the sound of steam and steel, of hurried footsteps and last goodbyes. But now it's quiet, too quiet. This is the story of the abandoned train station and the passengers who never stopped waiting. The Cleveland Union Terminal, once a marvel of American rail power in the early 20th century, saw thousands of people pass through each day. But as trains gave way to highways and airports, platforms emptied, and one wing of the station was eventually sealed off. They say it was for repairs. They say the city lost funding. But those who worked there whispered another reason. Something had taken root in the shadows, something that refused to leave. The South Terminal, as it was once called, was locked in 1967, but security guards and maintenance crews still reported strange things inside. Chairs rearranged, despite being in use for years. Ticket booths lit up, with no power running through the lines. And most chilling of all, footsteps echoing down the empty platform, accompanied by coughs, suitcases dragged, and the low murmur of people waiting. In 1983, an urban explorer named Jared Holt managed to sneak in through an old service tunnel with a camcorder. The footage, though grainy, shows long, empty halls, peeling posters from the 1940s, and benches coated in dust. But midway through the tape, something strange happens. Jared rounds a corner, and there, on the platform, stands a row of figures, silent, still, dressed in old-fashioned coats, hats, and gloves. Some held newspapers, others clutched purses or worn-out suitcases. They didn't move. They didn't breathe. And when he called out, none of them turned around. The camera shakes. Jared backs away. And just before the feed cuts out, we hear a distant whistle, long, low, mournful. But no train ever arrives. They never found Jared. His camcorder was discovered 2 weeks later, lying just outside the terminal gates. The last frame on the tape? A station clock, stuck at exactly 3:17 a.m. The time would come up again and again over the years, etched into dust, scratched into windows, even muttered by those who claimed to have wandered too close to the building. 3:17, the train never comes. In 1999, the city finally attempted to demolish the South Terminal. Crews were hired, equipment arrived, but within 3 days, 2 workers vanished. A third fell from a scaffold, claiming someone pushed him, though no one else was there. Work was halted. The entrance boarded up again. The report started anew. Visitors to the nearby Tower City Center Mall have occasionally caught glimpses of movement behind the boarded windows. One woman swore she saw a man in a fedora staring at her from the shadows. Another described a woman in a long black dress, pacing back and forth near the edge of the platform. But when they turned to look again, no one was there. What do they want? That question has haunted paranormal investigators for years. Some believe these are residual hauntings, echoes of passengers who died while waiting, victims of train accidents, illnesses, or even the 1918 flu pandemic, when entire rail lines became floating hospitals. Others believe it's something darker, a spiritual trap, a place where time fractured, and the souls who entered were never allowed to leave. One chilling account came from a former subway janitor named Lyle Benson. In 2006, he was tasked with sealing a drainage pipe that connected to the old rail tunnel. He described hearing a bell chime, like the kind used to announce arriving trains. Then came the clack of footsteps, then voices, full conversations echoing up the tunnel. When he shined his flashlight, he saw a full crowd, people dressed in 1930s attire, standing shoulder to shoulder on the platform, staring ahead with blank eyes. Then they all turned to look at him. Lyle ran. He never returned to work. Those who venture too close at night often speak of the same three things. The sound of a train, though the rails are long dead. A faint, glowing light moving along the tracks. And passengers waiting patiently in the dark, never speaking, never blinking. Some say if you stare long enough, one of them will raise a hand and gesture for you to join them. A local myth speaks of Platform 6, a section no longer on any map. It's said that if you find it and step across the yellow line, you'll hear the whistle blow, and the train will finally come. But it doesn't take you home. It takes you where they've been waiting. If you dream of the terminal, its cold walls, its flickering signs. If you hear a voice whisper, "All aboard," in the middle of the night, be careful, because the ghosts of Cleveland Station don't care where you came from, only that you have a ticket. And once you step onto the platform, you can never get off. Part 6, welcome back to BLACKRIGE Stories. Tonight, we descend deep beneath the cracked soil of Youngstown, Ohio, where time stands still and the air is heavy with cold dust and regret. This is the story of a man who never left the mine, a man whose cries still echo through the tunnels. The story of the ghost of a miner, buried but not at rest, still searching for a way out. In the early 1900s, Youngstown was a booming steel town, fueled by the dark arteries of coal mines running beneath its streets. One such mine, Black Hollow No. 7, was infamous even among hardened workers. They said it was too deep, too unstable, but it paid well, and in desperate times, danger pays more than safety ever will. On October 12, 1913, a miner collapse shook Black Hollow. A section of tunnel becaved in during the night shift. 17 men were buried alive. 6 made it out. 10 were never found. And then there was Elias Mercer. Elias was a quiet man, 38 years old, a widower with 2 sons. He worked the mines because there was nothing else left. His co-workers described him as methodical, polite, and always the last one out of the shaft. But that night, Elias didn't come home, and unlike the others, his body was never recovered. For weeks, rescue teams chipped away at the collapsed walls, hoping to reach pockets of air. At first, they heard tapping, 3 slow knocks, then silence. Then they heard screaming. By the time they broke through, the sounds had stopped. They say Elias died alone, trapped between timbers, clawing toward the light he'd never reach. But some believe he never really died. Soon after the rescue effort ended, miners refused to go near Tunnel B. They heard breathing behind the walls. Tools went missing, only to reappear neatly arranged at the tunnel mouth. One man swore he saw a figure at the far end of the shaft, helmet light flickering, but when he called out, the light blinked once then vanished. They sealed Tunnel B in 1914, but the ghost of Elias Mercer was already moving through the mine. Decades passed. The mine closed in the 1950s. The entrance was filled with concrete, but nearby homes began reporting strange vibrations beneath their foundations. Some said they could hear knocking at night, always in threes. And then came the dreams. People described visions of a man covered in soot, eyes wide with panic, reaching through stone, as if trying to claw his way out. Children would wake up screaming, crying about the man in the basement. In 1981, a high school student named Kara Whitmore, when exploring with friends near the old mine site, they found a cracked maintenance hatch behind a cluster of trees. Curious, they pried it open and climbed down. Kara's friends came back. Kara didn't. She was missing for 3 days. When police found her, She was wandering near a drainage ditch 3 miles from the mine entrance. Clothes torn, nails bloodied, dirt smeared across her face. When asked what happened, all she said was, "He showed me the way, but he still doesn't know where he's going." Kara never spoke again. She was diagnosed with catatonic schizophrenia, and her journal was filled with drawings of tunnels, hands pressed against stone, and one recurring phrase, "Not the dark, not alone, not the end." By the early 2000s, paranormal researchers began taking interest. Recordings in the area picked up unexplained moaning, clanging chains, and most disturbingly, a voice. Whispered, gravelly, begging, "Let me out." One researcher, Dr. Matthew Lang, conducted a thermal scan beneath the neighborhood built over the old shaft. They found heat signatures, moving, as if something or someone was still pacing underground. Dr. Lang quit his study a month later. His final note simply read, "He is still down there, and he is no longer alone." Local folklore now speaks of Mercer's curse. People living on former mine land report sudden nosebleeds, sleepwalking, or waking up with dirt under their fingernails, though they have no memory of digging. One family moved out after their son began sleep-talking in a low, foreign voice. Tunnel A is blocked. Tunnel B is broken. Tunnel C, Tunnel C, Tunnel C me. The legend says that Elias Mercer became more than a ghost. He became part of the mine itself. The tunnels are his lungs. The timber beams his bones. And every knock you hear in the night is him calling out one more time for release. So if you find yourself in Youngstown, walking near an empty lot, or feeling the earth shift beneath your feet, stop, listen. If you hear 3 knocks, don't knock back. If you hear your name whispered through stone, don't answer. And if you ever dream of cold, of damp walls, of someone's hand reaching toward yours from the dark, don't take it, because once you do, you'll never leave the mine either. Part 7, welcome back to BLACKRIGE Stories. Tonight, we travel to Ohioville, a quiet township resting near the Ohio-Pennsylvania border. It's a peaceful place by day, but when night falls, whispers travel with the wind. And if you listen closely near the old iron bridge, you might hear footsteps that don't belong to the living. This is the tale of the White Lady of Ohioville Bridge, a ghostly woman in a flowing dress, seen gliding across the bridge after midnight. Locals say she's more than just a spirit, she's a warning. The Ohioville Bridge was built in 1911, spanning the slow-moving waters of the Beaver River. Once a key route for farmers and traders, it's now a forgotten passage mostly used by teenagers, thrill seekers, and the unlucky. For over 100 years, accidents have plagued this bridge, and every story has the same detail. She appeared first. The first known sighting was in 1922, when a traveling salesman named Joseph Markel crashed his Ford Model T into the side railings. He survived, but barely. In his police report, he claimed he had swerved to avoid a woman in white standing in the middle of the road. The officer asked if she had moved. Markel responded, "No, she just watched me," and then vanished into mist. In 1939, a newlywed couple drowned beneath the bridge after their car plunged off during a rainstorm. Witnesses on the opposite bank said they saw a woman in white standing on the railing, arms outstretched, before the car even arrived. They thought it was a prank, until they heard the scream. Over the decades, the bridge earned the name the Widow's Walk, but no one could agree on the identity of the woman. Some say she was a bride, abandoned on her wedding day, who leapt into the river below. Others claim she was a mother searching for her lost child. But the most chilling version comes from a journal, discovered in a farmhouse attic just a mile from the bridge. It belonged to Annalise Holloway, dated October 1909. The journal speaks of a forbidden love between Annalise, a local farmer's daughter, and Thomas Braxley, a railroad worker from Pittsburgh. Their families disapproved, especially Annalise's father, who threatened to cut her off if she didn't marry someone respectable. Annalise and Thomas made a plan. They would elope, meet at the bridge, leave everything behind. But Thomas never showed up. Annalise waited in the cold autumn dark, dressed in her mother's white gown, clutching a suitcase and a letter. The next morning, Her body was found floating in the river. The suitcase was missing. The letter was never found. Some say Thomas changed his mind. Others believe her father intervened. But many believe her spirit never left that night. By the 1950s, her appearances became more frequent, always between midnight and 3 a.m., always in a long white dress, sometimes standing, sometimes walking, once hovering inches above the road, and always watching. Locals began to notice a pattern. When she appears, something terrible follows. A fire in 1964, a drowning in 1973, a missing child in 1987. Each time, someone reported seeing the white lady in the hours before tragedy struck. Some even claimed she spoke to them. A whisper, a plea, not threatening, more like a warning. In 2006, paranormal investigator Leah Dunmore led a group to record audio near the bridge. Around 2:12 a.m., their equipment captured a chilling EVP, electronic voice phenomenon. A woman's voice, faint but clear. He never came. He never came. Leah reported feeling cold hands around her wrists during the session. When she returned home, she found wet footprints on her hardwood floor, though it hadn't rained in days. She quit ghost hunting that year. The bridge is still there today, rusting, quiet, but never empty. People still drive across it, some brave, some unaware, and some changed. One man, a truck driver named Pete Carson, saw her in 2019. He said she stepped in front of his truck, then vanished in a flash of white. He pulled over, heart racing, only to find a wilted bouquet of flowers lying in the road. When he picked them up, a thorn pierced his finger. That night, his wife had a miscarriage. He never drives at night anymore. The legend now warns, if you see the White Lady of Ohioville Bridge, don't stop, don't speak, and never look into her eyes. They say if you do, she'll show you something. Not your death, but someone else's. A loved one, a friend, a stranger whose fate you now carry. So the next time you find yourself crossing an old bridge in the middle of the night, and the air suddenly grows cold, and the lights flicker, and you spot a woman in white standing just ahead, keep driving, because whatever she wants to show you, you're not ready to see it. Part 8, welcome back to BLACKRIGE Stories. Tonight, we turn our attention to Dayton, Ohio, where a century-old public school hides a mystery that students and teachers have whispered about for decades. A single room, sealed from the inside, untouched since the 1950s. This is the story of Room 104, a place no one enters because no one can. Dayton Central High was built in 1915, a sprawling brick structure with arched windows and towering staircases. It once housed nearly 1,000 students, but enrollment dropped in the 1990s. Parts of the building were closed off. Some halls were abandoned, but even when the school was full, there was always one room that remained off limits. Room 104. The door is locked, the windows are barred, and the inside is silent. According to old faculty records, Room 104 was last used in 1957 as an advanced literature classroom. The teacher at the time was Edgar Morell, a reclusive man known for his love of Gothic novels and unusual assignments. One semester, Morell assigned his students a controversial project: to keep dream journals for 30 days, and then write a fictional story based on their worst nightmare. Several students reported sleep paralysis, night terrors, and even visions of a man watching them from inside the walls. Then, one morning in March 1957, the classroom door was found locked from the inside. No sound came from within, no response, no key worked. When the school custodian finally forced the door open with a crowbar, he found nothing. No desks, no chairs, no books, and no Mr. Morell. Only a single item remained: a student's notebook, left open on the floor. The final sentence written in shaky, red ink: he is awake. After that day, the school board ordered the room to be sealed permanently. They welded shut the door hinges, bricked over the interior wall, and painted it to match the hallway. But the students still knew, because sometimes you could hear it. Whispers, soft at first, like pages turning, then louder, faster, like breathing. Students would walk past the old hallway and swear they heard scratching behind the wall or caught the scent of burnt paper. One girl claimed a locker door flung open by itself, revealing a note that read, "Come finish your story." Over the years, rumors spread. Room 104 was cursed. Some said Morel had opened a doorway through the dream journals, letting something inside. Others believed the room was a nexus, a fixed point in the school that no longer obeyed the laws of space or time. A former janitor, Walter Pritchard, confessed before his death in 1982 that the room had been reopened once, in secret, by a curious headmaster. The man vanished 3 days later. All they found was his pocket watch, ticking backward. In 2004, a team of local ghost hunters managed to sneak into the school during renovations. They brought recording equipment and thermal cameras. They never made it to room 104, but they captured something chilling in the hallway. A faint silhouette, standing perfectly still in front of the bricked-up wall. The footage shows the figure slowly turning its head, facing the camera. The hunters left immediately. One of them later claimed that ever since that night, he's been waking up with lines of ink on his skin, forming sentences he never wrote. More recently, in 2021, a substitute teacher, Elena Griggs, unknowingly placed her backpack against the sealed wall while waiting outside a nearby classroom. When she reached for it 5 minutes later, she found it unzipped, and one of her notebooks was missing. In its place was a new one, old leather-bound with yellowing pages. The first page had a single sentence: "You left the door open." The school now avoids any mention of room 104. The hallway is blocked with plastic barriers and warning signs. Students call it the quiet wing. But nothing ever stays quiet for long. A junior student named Marcus Hill took a dare from friends in late 2023. They told him to knock on the brick wall and say, "I'm ready to write." Marcus did. That night, he went home and fell asleep at his desk. His parents found him the next morning, eyes open, unblinking, still breathing, but not waking up. He's been in a coma ever since. Doctors can't explain it. No injury, no trauma, but an MRI of his brain showed unusual activity in the temporal lobe, as if he were still dreaming, but not alone. A neurologist described the pattern as foreign linguistic structuring. In simpler terms, someone or something is trying to speak through him. So if you ever walk through an old school and find a hallway that suddenly gets colder, where the air feels heavier, where your thoughts begin to wander towards stories you've never read and phrases you've never heard, you might be near room 104. Don't knock, don't speak, and never, ever write your name on the wall, because the story inside that room isn't finished yet. Part 9, welcome back to BLACKRIGE Stories. Tonight's tale takes us to the quiet town of Springfield, Ohio, where one of the oldest cemeteries in the state hides a restless truth. At first glance, Springfield Cemetery is like any other. Rows of time-worn gravestones, crooked iron gates, and soft hills carpeted in fallen leaves. But when night falls, something strange stirs beneath the soil. Locals say the cemetery is haunted, not by ghosts that float or scream, but by something more unsettling, the sound of sighing. Long, drawn-out breaths that echo across the headstones, as if the earth itself is tired, as if something beneath is waiting to exhale. The first documented incident dates back to 1897, when a gravedigger named Samuel Lott vanished during a late burial shift. The next morning, his shovel was found standing upright in a fresh grave, yet no body had been buried there. In his place, they found a journal, half buried in the dirt, open to the final page. The soil moves when no one is near. By the 1920s, strange reports became common. Children claimed to hear voices while walking past. Dogs refused to enter the cemetery gates, and at least one groundskeeper, James Wells, swore he saw someone digging with their bare hands near Plot 18B, only to find the soil untouched when he approached. He resigned the next day. The cemetery's most notorious feature is the row of the unmarked, a stretch of graves with no names, no birth dates, and no records in town archives. Some believe they were plague victims. Others say the land was cursed long before the cemetery was built, once a battlefield. or perhaps something even older. One legend speaks of a woman known only as the Mourner in Gray. She appears near the unmarked graves, dressed in an old-fashioned mourning dress, her face hidden by a black veil. Witnesses say she doesn't walk. She glides, moving silently, always with a single red rose in her hand. If you follow her, she disappears behind a headstone, and when you look, the grave is open. In 1974, a group of teens dared each other to spend the night in the cemetery. Only 2 returned. They were found the next morning, curled up inside a mausoleum, repeating the same sentence over and over. Don't breathe. If it hears you breathe, it will find you. The 3rd teen, Eli Granger, was never found, but 3 weeks later, his backpack surfaced, lying on a mound of freshly turned soil. Inside was a tape recorder. The only thing on the tape was the sound of heavy breathing, and then a long, sorrowful sigh. In more recent years, even daytime visitors have reported strange phenomena. Graves found disturbed, earth shifted, headstones cracked. One man claimed he saw a handprint on the inside of a mausoleum window. Another, a local florist, swore the flowers she left on a grave were gone by the next day, replaced by a bundle of dead leaves tied with hair. Security cameras installed at the gates never record anything, only static. Or worse, footage rewinds itself, showing the cemetery as it looked decades ago. In 2012, a paranormal investigator named Lena Walsh visited the cemetery at night with her team. They brought sensors, spirit boxes, and motion detectors. For the first hour, nothing happened. Then Lena heard what she described as the softest exhale behind my ear, like someone sighing out my name. She turned, no one there. The team called it off. But the next morning, Lena discovered dirt under her fingernails, and she hadn't touched the ground. Even stranger, her recorder had captured a message, whispered so faintly it was almost missed. "We're still down here." Perhaps the most chilling incident occurred in 2019, when a funeral was held for a young woman, Marie Ellison. She was buried in Plot 22C. The ceremony was uneventful until 2 nights later, when her casket was found unearthed, not opened, just lifted, as if something below had pushed it up. The ground was examined. No animal tunnels, no flooding, just finger-like grooves carved into the soil beneath the coffin. The cemetery board has since reinforced many graves with concrete and steel, but it hasn't stopped the sounds. Those who live nearby say they still hear sighs, long, aching exhales, carried on the wind after midnight. One woman even recorded a sigh that seemed to respond to her questions. She asked, "Are you at peace?" The answer, another sigh, but this time, at the very end, a soft whisper, "No." So if you find yourself near Springfield and feel the urge to wander among the tombstones at night, remember this. If the ground begins to shift beneath your feet, if you hear someone breathing close to your ear when no one is there, if the sighs start coming faster, like someone waking up after a long sleep, leave immediately, because the dead at Springfield are not resting. Part 10, welcome back to BLACKRIGE Stories. Tonight, we journey into the heart of Akron, Ohio, where the air once rang with the pounding rhythm of steel, and where some say it still does. Even though the steel mill has been abandoned for over 30 years, its echoes haven't gone quiet. And for those brave enough to step near its rusted gates after midnight, the machines still move. The Akron Steel Mill, once a bustling symbol of American industry, officially shut down in 1991. Thousands of workers were laid off. The furnaces went cold. The floors were cleared. But the building was never demolished. It was left to rot, like a monument to something unfinished. Local legend begins with security guards stationed at the mill in the years right after its closure. They spoke of footsteps echoing down the empty catwalks, lights flickering on without power, and the most unsettling of all, the sound of machinery whirring to life in the dead of night. One guard, Frank Delgado, swore he heard the blast furnace ignite at 2:17 a.m. He fled the property. The furnace hadn't worked in over a decade. The story might have ended there, if not for a group of amateur urban explorers who entered the facility in 2003. They brought cameras, flashlights, and a handheld camcorder. Footage later recovered from the scene showed the group laughing, filming rusted conveyor belts and control panels, until one of them stops. He says quietly, "You hear that? It sounds like hammers." Moments later, the sound is unmistakable, metal slamming on metal, rhythmic, industrial, steady. But when the group rounds the corner, the entire factory floor is empty. No people, no machines moving, just the echo of something that should no longer exist. In the background of that video, barely audible, is a voice. It says, "Keep working. We're not done." The factory has long been off limits, with fences surrounding its perimeter and no trespassing signs posted everywhere. But even those who live nearby report strange activity. Bright flashes inside the building at night, the clang of chains being lifted, the shriek of metal grinding against metal. One woman living across the street described seeing a man in a hard hat standing at a second-story window. He raised one hand, then disappeared. She called the police. When they arrived, they found the door sealed with chains from the inside. Among locals, the most famous story is that of Red-Eye Joe, a foreman who died in the mill during an explosion in 1978. His crew claimed the accident was due to a pressure valve that failed, but some whisper that Joe had been seeing things for weeks leading up to it. He spoke of a second crew no one else could see, workers who never clocked out, men who stood beside the machines but never touched them. Joe died with his hand on the emergency shut-off switch, and now, on certain nights, people say they can see him, standing in the control booth, his face pale, and two red sparks glowing where his eyes should be. In 2015, a professional film crew sought to make a documentary about America's abandoned industrial sites. They gained permission to enter the Akron steel mill for a 48-hour shoot. The crew lasted 11 hours. According to their lead cameraman, they set up in the main turbine hall. Everything was silent until the air grew hot and a low hum began to fill the space. The turbines, lifeless for decades, began to spin, slowly at first, then faster. The crew panicked. The director, Michelle Dawes, tried to record the phenomenon, but her camera shut off. The last thing it captured? A shadow moving across the catwalk, walking against the grain of the noise. The crew left everything behind: lights, audio gear, even their tripods. When investigators returned 2 days later, the equipment was still there, but all batteries were drained. All digital files were corrupted, and deep in the concrete dust was a single message, drawn with the finger: "Don't stop the line." Retired workers who once manned the steel mill have shared eerily similar dreams. They describe being back at their stations, surrounded by steam, hearing the foreman shout over the noise, "We're behind schedule." They wake up sweating, hands clenched, the smell of burning coal still in their noses. Some have taken to leaving their old work boots at the gates, as a sign of respect, they say. Others believe it's an offering, because something inside the mill is still working, even if no one is there to see it. In 2022, a local historian, Robert Keene, made one final attempt to investigate. He entered with a body camera, flashlight, and audio recorder. He was inside for only 23 minutes. The footage he recovered is mostly static, but there's one moment at 1748 where you can clearly see a conveyor belt begin to roll, though no power was supplied. And over that mechanical noise, a voice whispers in the background, "Clock in." Robert never returned to the site. To this day, the Akron steel mill remains abandoned on paper. But ask anyone who's lived there long enough, and they'll tell you, at night, the machines still run. The workers still report in. And if you listen closely, you might hear someone calling from inside. Keep your head down. We've got quotas to fill. If you're ever driving through Akron after dark, and you see steam rise from an empty building, if you hear the sound of forging hammers, or the sharp hiss of cooling steel, don't stop. Don't look inside. And above all, don't clock in. Because once you start working in that mill, you don't get to leave.